Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the March 2024 edition of Socialism for All. And here we're taking a quick break from our anti-Browderism playlist to do a thematically related side reading of Fascism and Social Revolution by Palme Dutt from 1935. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description. So the full title of this book is Fascism and Social Revolution, a study of the economics and politics of the extreme stages of capitalism in decay, by Rajani Palme Dutt. We are reading the third edition from 1935, published by International Publishers, New York. This copy is a PDF hosted at the Marxists Internet Archive, marxists.org. Thanks as usual to MIA for hosting this and thousands of other free Marxist texts. So the work begins with two prefatory or introductory quotes. The first is from Marx on the communist trial at Cologne, 1851. Quote, "We say to the workers, you will have to go through 15, 20, 50 years of civil wars and international wars, not only in order to change existing conditions, but also in order to change yourselves and fit yourselves for the exercise of political power." The second quote is from Lenin's quote, "Left-wing Communism," 1921. The bourgeoisie sees in Bolshevism only one side: insurrection, violence, terror. It endeavors, therefore, to prepare itself especially for resistance and opposition in that direction alone. It is possible that, in single cases, in single countries, for more or less short periods, they will succeed. We must reckon with such a possibility, and there is absolutely nothing dreadful to us in the fact that the bourgeoisie might succeed in this. Communism springs up from positively all sides of social life. Its sprouts are everywhere, without exception. The contagion, to use the favorite and pleasantest comparison of the bourgeoisie and the bourgeois police, has very thoroughly penetrated into the organism and has totally impregnated it. If one of the vents were to be stopped up with special care, the, quote, "contagion" would find another, sometimes most unexpected vent. Life will assert itself. Let the bourgeoisie rave. Let it work itself into a frenzy, commit stupidities, take vengeance in advance on the Bolsheviks, and endeavor to exterminate in India, Hungary, Germany, etc. more hundreds, thousands, and hundreds of thousands of the Bolsheviks of yesterday or those of tomorrow. Acting thus, the bourgeoisie acts as did all classes condemned to death by history. The communists must know that the future at any rate is theirs. Therefore, we can and must unite the intensest passion in the great revolutionary struggle with the coolest and soberest calculations of the mad ravings of the bourgeoisie. In all cases and in all countries, communism grows. Its roots are so deep that persecution neither weakens nor debilitates, but rather strengthens it. Now on to the preface to the third edition. The 7th Congress of the Communist International has brought in a new stage of the struggle of fascism and anti-fascism, the period of the division of the working class forces, of the holding back of the majority of the workers from a common class front by the policies of reformism, which alone has made possible the temporary victories of fascism in a number of countries, is drawing to its close. The period of the united working class front, and of the drawing together of all the working masses in a wide anti-fascist people's front, is now opening. The directives of the 7th Congress of the Communist International, on the basis of the historic report of Georgy Dimitrov on Fascism and the United Front, will have played a decisive role in developing this new stage, which opens the way to the defeat of fascism. The present study of fascism was originally written in the latter part of 1933 and the early months of 1934, and was published in England and America in the summer of 1934. It thus represents a study of fascism at the height of the wave of the Second Fascist Offensive, based on the whole development and history of fascism in Italy, in Germany, and in Austria, on the beginnings of the fascist offensive in France, in England and the United States, and on the beginnings of the United Front of Resistance to Fascism in France in 1934. An appendix brings the record up to date to the beginning of 1935. A general theoretical study of fascism on an international scale as a phenomenon of post-war capitalism is still lacking. In the meantime, this book represents a first attempt in this direction. The main aims of this book are fourfold. First, to analyze the essence and role of fascism in the history of capitalism as a phenomenon of extreme capitalist decay and of the intensified general crisis of capitalism, and in particular to relate it to the general economic and political tendencies of post-war, they mean World War I, capitalism in the most recent period. Second, to show the causes of the victory of fascism in a number of countries on the basis of a historical examination of the transition to fascism in Italy, Germany, and Austria, with special reference to the decisive role of social democracy in facilitating the victory of fascism. Third, to expose the actual character, ideology, program, and practice of fascism as the open, terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinist, and most imperialist elements of finance capital, endeavoring to mask its real aims by the most extreme and shameless social and national demagogy, and in this way, seeking to build up a basis of support in the population, especially among the petty bourgeoisie and backward workers, but in reality exercising the heaviest oppression and intensified exploitation against all the working masses and lower and middle strata in the interests of monopoly capital, and driving forward to war as its necessary outcome. Fourth, to show the conditions of the fight against fascism, and in particular, the decisive importance of the united working class front and of the broad anti-fascist front of the working masses for the successful fight against fascism, and in this connection, to deal with the relations of bourgeois democracy and fascism, the question of the defense of bourgeois democratic rights and liberties against the fascist offensive, and at the same time, to show the necessity of the dictatorship of the proletariat and of the socialist revolution as the only final alternative to fascism, and the only guarantee of final victory over fascism. Since the book originally appeared, many new developments have taken place, among the most important of which are the new processes taking place in the social democratic parties, offering hopes of a healing of the split in the working class and of the passing over of the majority of the workers to the revolutionary camp. The sections on social democracy, analyzing its role in the period 1918 to 1933, must therefore be read historically. The decisive battles against fascism, the most malignant and barbarous expression of modern capitalism in decay, are still before us. The two camps are forming with ever clearer alignment on a world scale. The menace of fascism and the menace of war, both the expression of the present stage of capitalism in the period of the intensified general crisis and of the intensification of all antagonisms, overhang the existing world situation. The decisive battles between the forces of the old, decaying society and the rising new social forces will be fought in the coming period. Rajani P. Dutt, August 1935. Introduction. A very sharp issue confronts present society. Events move with great speed. The traditional forms of thought still cling to the remnants of past periods. The victory and advance of fascism over an extending area has come as a brutal shock to millions. Yet fascism is no sudden growth. For a decade and a half, the whole post-war social development has been incubating fascism. To all those who have hitherto accepted as unquestioned the existing social forms and their continuity, and above all, to those who have looked to the possibility of peaceful, progressive advance within those existing social forms, and who have dismissed the revolutionary outlook as the fantasy of a minority, fascism, and more especially the victory of fascism in an advanced industrial country such as Germany, has come as a brutal shock. It may yet prove a salutary shock, if it can open their eyes to the real issues of our period. With every year, and with every month, that the long overdue social revolution in Western Europe and America, for which the World War of 1914 already gave the signal, that is, the ending of the private ownership of the means of production, which inevitably produces the increasing contradictions, anarchy, destruction, and barbarism of the present day, is delayed, denied, and postponed, the world situation grows more desperate, and the whole future of society is brought into question. The World War of 1914, the opening of the World Socialist Revolution in 1917, the partial revolutions and civil struggles succeeding the war, the post-war chaos, the world economic crisis since 1929, the victory and ever-growing strength of socialist construction in the Soviet Union alongside the decline of the capitalist world, and now the advance of fascism in the capitalist world, an approach to a second world war. These are the successive warnings of the real issues of the present stage. Fascism has already been the subject of an enormous discussion and literature over 12 years, and above all, over the past 2 years. Yet, the treatment of fascism has hardly yet brought out its full significance. On the one side, fascism has been widely treated as simply the expression of brutality and violence, of militarism and suppression, of national and racial egoism, of the revolt against culture, against the old slogans of liberty, equality, and brotherhood. On the other side, fascism has been treated as the expression of national rebirth, of the emergence of youth, of the end of decadent liberalism and intellectualism, of the advance to a balanced and organized social order. In order to get closer to the true character of fascism, it is necessary to go deeper, to see fascism in relation to the whole character of modern social development, of which fascism is an expression and reflection, and above all, to get down to the basic movement and driving forces of economy and technique, of which the social and political forms, including fascism, are only the reflection. Such an examination will reveal beyond dispute that the modern development of technique and productive powers has reached a point at which the existing capitalist forms are more and more incompatible with the further development of production and utilization of technique. There is war between them, increasingly violent and open since 1914, and entering into a new and extreme stage in the world economic crisis and its outcome. This basic conflict underlies all the social and political problems of the present period, and in particular the advance of capitalism to fascist forms. Only two paths are in fact open before present society at the existing stage. One is to endeavor to maintain at all costs the existing class domination at the expense of the requirements of productive development as well as at the expense of all human cultural values. This means, in practice, to strangle the powers of production, to retard technical development, to destroy material and human forces, to crush the development of ideas and thought, and to concentrate the entire society on organization for war, leading in turn to still greater destruction and decay. This is the path of fascism, the path to which the bourgeoisie in all modern countries where it rules is increasingly turning, the path of human decay. The other alternative is to organize the new productive forces as social forces, as the commonwealth of the entire existing society for the rapid and enormous raising of the material basis of society, the destruction of poverty, ignorance and disease, and of class and national separations, the unlimited carrying forward of science and culture, and the organization of the world communist society in which all human beings will for the first time be able to reach full stature and play their part in the collective development of the future humanity. This is the path of communism, the path to which the working masses, who are the living representatives of the productive forces, and whose victory over capitalist class domination can alone achieve the realization of this path, are increasingly turning, the path which modern science and productive development makes both possible and necessary, and which opens up undreamt of possibilities for the future development of the human race. The concrete realization of this path has already begun to be demonstrated with daily more gigantic victories of new construction and new culture in the Soviet Union in 1/6 of the world, showing the way forward for the rest of the world. Which of these alternatives will conquer? This is the sharp question confronting human society today. Revolutionary Marxism is confident that, because the productive forces are on the side of communism, communism will conquer, that the victory of communism, which is expressed in the victory of the proletariat, is ultimately inevitable as the sole possible final outcome of the existing contradictions, that the nightmare of the other alternative, of the dark ages whose creeping shadow begins already to haunt the imagination of current thinkers, will yet be defeated, by the organized forces of international communism. But this inevitably is not independent of the human factor. On the contrary, it can only be realized through the human factor. Hence the urgency of the fight against fascism, and for the victory of the proletariat, on which the whole future of human society depends. The time grows shorter, the sands are running through the glass. To many, the alternative of fascism or communism is no welcome alternative, and they would prefer to deny it, and to regard both as rival, and in their view even parallel, forms of extremism. They dream of a third alternative which shall be neither, and shall realize a peaceful, harmonious progress without class struggle, through the forms of capitalist, quote, democracy, quote, planned capitalism, etc. This dream of a third alternative is in fact illusory. Quick comment, I'll add that it's an illusion, it's a beautiful illusion, but it is an illusion. I'd be all for that if it would work. So we can't deny the beauty of that idea, but it is just an idea, it is not workable in reality. The capitalists will never let that path happen, and it in fact depends on their consent, which is never to be granted. Continuing. On the one side, it is the echo of the conceptions of a past period, of the period of liberal capitalism, which was already perishing with the advent of imperialism. Comment, by imperialism we mean capitalist imperialism in the Marxist-Leninist sense. Lenin wrote a book called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, and Lenin summarized this final stage of capitalism as having a number of characteristics described in the book, but if you were to summarize it in 3 words, it is advanced monopoly capitalism. In other words, after the period where a nascent capitalism rises and overthrows feudalism, and there's free competition, there is a second period where the various capitalist enterprises start to consolidate. Capitalism has winners and losers. The winners get bigger, the losers get eaten, and capital consolidates. And so do its social institutions change to reflect this later period of consolidated advanced monopoly capitalism. So you get the rise of the military-industrial complex and so on. We are still in that period of capitalism today, continuing, and which cannot be revived when the conditions that gave rise to it have passed away, in the stage of the extreme decay of capitalism and of the extreme intensification of the class struggle. Even the caricature of democratic forms, which is still precariously maintained in the imperialist states of Western Europe and America, is increasingly supplemented and displaced by more and more open dictatorial and repressive methods, the increase of executive powers, the diminution of the role of parliament, the growth of emergency powers, the extension of police action and violence, the restriction of the rights of speech and meeting, the restriction of the right to strike, the violent suppression of demonstrations and strikes, combined with the typical methods of social demagogy of the millionaire press, stampede elections, etc. The trend of capitalism in all countries toward fascist forms is unmistakable and is wider than the question of a Mussolini or a Hitler. On the other side, the dream of a planned capitalism is already an unconscious groping after fascism without facing its logical implications. For in practice, the endeavor to realize the self-contradictory aim of a, quote, planned capitalism can only be pursued along the path of fascism, of repression of the productive forces and of the working class. Thus, the myth of a third alternative is in fact no alternative, but in reality, a part of the advance toward fascism. Fascism is not inevitable. Fascism is not a necessary stage of capitalist development through which all countries must pass. The social revolution can forestall fascism, as it has done in Russia. But if the social revolution is delayed, then the menace of fascism becomes urgent. Fascism can be fought. Fascism can be fought and defeated. But fascism can only be fought and defeated if it is fought without illusions and with clear understanding of the issues. The causes of fascism lie deep-rooted in existing society. Capitalism, in its decay, breeds fascism. Capitalist democracy in decay breeds fascism. The only final guarantee against fascism, the only final wiping out of the causes of fascism, is the victory of the proletarian dictatorship. Comment, the end of capitalism. Continuing. Fascism offers no solution of a possible stable social organization to replace the existing society in dissolution. On the contrary, fascism carries forward all the contradictions of existing class society, because fascism is only a form, a means of capitalist class rule in conditions of extreme decay. Not only that, but fascism carries forward the contradictions of existing class society to their most extreme point, when the contradictions are laid bare in open civil war, and the organization of the entire capitalist state upon the basis of permanent civil war. Fascism is thus society at war within itself. Comment, anyone living in the United States, if that doesn't strike a chord with you, check your pulse. Continuing. On this basis, fascism, so far from being a solution of existing social problems, represents their extreme intensification to the point of final disruption. The only final outcome can be the victory of communism, because communism alone contains within itself the solution of the contradictions. But in the interim period of struggle and transition, if it's prolonged, if fascism succeeds for a period in organizing its basis of civil war and violent reactionary dictatorship, an enormous consequent destruction of material wealth, of human lives, and of culture can take place, and increasingly threatens. Therein is the desperate urgency of the fight, not only for the ultimately inevitable victory of communism, but for the rapid victory of communism. The urgency of the present issues needs no emphasis. All sense the gathering storms. A host of issues, of war, of armaments, of fascism, of the economic chaos, are taken up. But none of these issues can be taken in abstraction. It is necessary to see them in relation to the whole social development, to the basic issue underlying all these forms, the issue of the rule of the bourgeoisie or of the proletariat, of capitalism or socialism, on which the future of the human race depends. Present society is ripe, is rotten ripe for the social revolution. Delay does not mean pacific waiting on the issue. The dialectic of reality knows no standing still. Delay means ever-extending destruction, decay, barbarism. The words of Lenin on the eve of October apply with gathering force to the present world situation. Quote, "Delay means death." Rajani P. Dutt, May 1934.